your Jamaican scholar, and today I'm going to be talking about how I landed the Fulbright scholarship. In my last video, I mentioned that Fulbright was one of the ways that I paid for my graduate studies. It was my foot in the door, it was how I got into the US. And so I wanted to just share some information that would help future applicants and aspirants. Now, just a little bit of advertisement right here. The Fulbright Scholarship currently is accepting applications. Now, different countries might have different application windows, but in Jamaica, currently, if you go on the US Embassy website, you will be able to see that applications are now open and they close on the 3rd of July. So you have some time. Go ahead and check out the US Embassy's website to see if the Fulbright Scholarship is for you. So who qualifies for a Fulbright Scholarship? Well, if you're in Jamaica, you must be a Jamaican citizen who is currently residing in Jamaica. You must have a first class or upper second class honors. You must not be currently pursuing graduate studies or be accepted to pursue graduate studies. You also should not be a US green card holder. You should also be willing to return to Jamaica for 2 years at the end of the program. Now, not everyone who would like to apply for a Fulbright scholarship will qualify, and that is because they're currently funding people who want to study in the areas of the humanities, the natural sciences, social sciences, as well as engineering and math. But if you are intending to study in one of those areas, then let's continue on. So now that we've covered who is eligible, let's talk a little bit about the application. Now, as I said before, the applications are currently open, and luckily for many people, the applications will not close until in July. In the past, normally the applications would have closed at the end of May. Now, another thing that is great news for the persons who are applying this season is that the GMAT and GRE is not required to apply. Once only those persons who are finalists are actually required to complete those exams, and those exams are really exams for persons who are entering into graduate school. So if you're going to a business school, then you would need to have the GMAT. If you're going to study in other areas like the social sciences, the natural sciences, then you would need the GRE. Most universities require GRE scores or GMAT scores as a part of the criteria that they're looking for when persons are applying. So those are two great things for this year's applicants, and that's 2020, is that one, you do not need to do the GRE before you apply. If you become a finalist, then the embassy will pay for your GRE, for you to take the GRE exam. And the second thing is that the application period is a much longer window. You have until the 3rd of July of this year to apply. Okay. Another piece of good news for this year's applicants is that quite a few universities have waived the GMAT GRE requirement for their applicants, and so you might find that the embassy is also waiving that requirement that their finalists complete the GRE or GMAT. So in terms of the application, now for any scholarship, I don't know a scholarship that has a 1-page application or a 2-page application. Most scholarships want to know your whole life story. The Fulbright scholarship is not going to be any different. In fact, when I saw the application, I was like, oh my gosh, I had to really muster up the strength and take several attempts at completing the application. And so the first thing that I would say is get your application early, read through it, and then take your time and complete the application. It is not something that you can do at the last minute. They will ask you things about your history and so on and so forth. They will also ask about what you want to study and why you want to study it. No, that is probably one of the very important things on the application. Why is this? Because they are looking for persons who can come back to their home countries and make significant contributions. You will know that a lot of past Fulbrighters are in positions of power and influence in their countries, and they want to continue that tradition. And so they're not looking for people who are going off to do degrees that serve just themselves. They're looking for persons who are going to be studying things that are of national significance, or when they come back, they're in a position to take up roles that will make a contribution to their country. And so you want to think about what you are going to study, what topic it is, what particular area, and how does that tie back to impact in your country. That is a very, very important thing on your application. Another important part of the Fulbright application is your personal statement. And your personal statement gives the scholarship panel an introduction to you, the type of person you are, what motivates you, what your hopes and dreams are. So it's not just really solely focused on this is what I want to study and this is why I want to study it. Your personal statement is really, why do I deserve this scholarship? What is unique and different about me that is going to capture their imagination, make the persons believe in you, help you to get through that initial round where they're just skimming through applications, and actually get you in front of the interview panel to tell your story. So you want to really put some thought into that personal statement. Now, in my personal statement, I had a lot to talk about. I was a first generation college student. I am the first of 7 children. I mentioned that, my mom had me as a teenager. Going through school was always a struggle. And I have a love for my country and want to help my country. And I actually kind of laid out like my path, how I got to where I was at the time and where I wanted to be. Okay, so that's the application, and you have to have a strong application. If you don't write well, I would suggest writing a number of drafts and then having somebody read it over and over and over and over again. Another thing that is going to accompany your application is your resume, and you want to make sure that you have a good resume. And I'm not just talking about a well-written resume, I'm talking about a resume that speaks to who you are. So how do you build the resume before you write it? Well, first and foremost, if you're in school, you want to get involved. You want to be in student leadership, or you want to do some kind of non-profit work, volunteer your time, stuff like that. When I was in school, I was heavily involved on my dorm, in student government, in leadership, and so I had that profile. Now, as a working person, sometimes you say, how do I then, I'm not in school, how do I then, show that I have some kind of civic pride? Well, what I did was actually my whole history of involvement when I was in school didn't stop when I finished school. When I went to work, I actually, joined the sports and social club, got into leadership in the sports and social club, and also went out in the community as a part of my job. I funded little projects, and that actually showed that I had some kind of good intent towards my fellow man, and that is something that they're looking for. So whether you're in the Lions Club, the Kiwanis Club, the Rotary Club, or you are on a non-profit board, you run a non-profit, you volunteer in the community, those are some of the things that you want to be doing. And I was able on my application to show that since primary school, I have been involved coming all the way up. So for example, in 2013, I entered Miss Jamaica Festival Queen. That was something that I had on my application, in addition to my campus involvement, in addition to what involvement I had once I started working. So you want to make sure that you not only have a well-written resume, but the resume has substance, and that substance is not just your job and your GPA, but also the human side, how you have been contributing to your community. That definitely helps. Another very, very important part of the application is your recommendations. You want to make sure that you are getting recommendations from people who know you well and who actually will speak glowingly of you. Now, that also is an investment of time over the years. So when I applied for the Fulbright scholarship, I got a recommendation from my boss at work. I also got recommendations from two of my lecturers at the University of Technology Jamaica, where I earned my undergraduate degree. And those persons were happy to write my recommendations for me, and it showed in what they wrote. So you don't want to just go and pick somebody to write a recommendation for you because they can complete it quickly. You want to make sure that you pick people who know you well, who are able to speak to your academic ability, your involvement in the community, and your potential to complete studies, come back and make a contribution. Those are the things that the referees should be saying about you, right? So you want to make sure that your references are saying those things about you. If the person barely knows you, not because that person might have a big name or something, if that person can't speak glowingly of you, then that recommendation might not be strong enough to get you through that initial scan of applications. So again, you want to make sure that the persons that you choose for your references are actually persons who know you well and can speak well of you, can speak highly of you. And I would suggest that you ask for them early so that you're not running down people, and because of that, because you can't get the reference letter early enough, you have to know switch to somebody who can get it to you quickly, but they don't know you as well or can't speak as highly of you. That is going to be extremely important. And I mean, a lot of times lecturers are hard to get a hold of and so on and so forth. So you want to make sure that you approach them early, explain to them what you want, when you want it, and get it done. Now, once you have your application completed, you have filled in all the information about yourself, your family, and all of that, and you have a glowing personal statement, you have your letters of recommendation, you provide all the documents that they ask for, you submit your application, you sit at home and you wait with your fingers crossed, and you hope that you get shortlisted. And I was shortlisted and invited to an interview. And the first thing that I will say to you is, do not be late for your interview. I was late for my interview and I arrived in a state. I was coming out of a meeting at work and I literally booked it up to the embassy. And when I got there, I almost was having an anxiety attack because I'm like, they're definitely not going to give this scholarship to me. I am so late. I've had the panel waiting and I was the last interviewee of the day. So one thing that I would say to you is arrive early to your interview once you're shortlisted, because I'm telling you, you want to go into that interview calm, collected, in control, and not worrying that you have disrespected the panel because you are late. You also want to dress appropriately for your interview. Wear a nice suit. I would suggest not necessarily going out and buying, but dressing fairly, in a corporate fashion. You can wear bright colors, that is fine. You just want to make sure that your clothes fit well, right? So whatever is your favorite or best outfit, put that on. When you go into the interview, one of the things that I learned about interviewing is you don't sit down until you're invited to. That was something that I also adopted. I went inside, they introduced themselves, we shook hands, and then they invited me to have a seat, and I had a seat. Now, you want to project confidence into the interview. You want to make eye contact. You want to smile. You should know what you wrote on your application. So I would say to you, before you even get into the interview, read over your application, read over your personal statement, because each person on the panel will have questions for you, and through those questions, they want to see you shine. Now, bear in mind that you don't want to just be regurgitating what you have on the application. You want to come alive because they've already read the application. They want to get to know you. They want you to sell yourself as to how you are going to take the scholarship and you're going to run with it. And so I would say go into the interview confident first and foremost. Even though I was late, I went into the interview. I sat there, I smiled, I made eye contact. I tried to answer their questions as honestly and forthrightly as possible. And then when I left the interview, I felt like, okay, this went all right. It could have gone worse. Now, one thing I did in the interview that I think everybody should consider is questions to ask your panel. No, not necessarily to ask, when will I be hearing back from you? Because that's a normal question. But is there anything you want to know? On the panel, you might find that there are past Fulbrighters, there are representatives from public affairs, which is the section that administers the scholarship. You might find that you have other representatives of the US government or the US embassy as a part of the panel. You want to think about what to ask. So if you have past Fulbrighters on the panel, you probably want to ask them, you know, what were their experience was like, where they went to school, what top piece of advice they would give somebody who is, thinking of going on the scholarship. So you want to make sure that you're asking questions that are not just about the money and will I get it and when will I hear back, right? And that is extremely important. Now, one pro tip that I want to share with you. Even though you are not expected to have applied to any schools or be currently studying, you should know where you could possibly study what you want to study. Which means that even though you don't have a preference, the application will ask you, so have you considered any schools? And it would look good for you that you went online, you looked up your program, you know the best universities that your program are at, that your program is at, right? And also some of the professors that you are possibly interested in working with. Now that shows that you are actually serious about what you want to study. You're not just applying to apply or as some kind of rules to get into the US, right? You should actually be serious about your studies. And so that's one of the questions they asked me in the actual interview. And I was like, I know I'm not supposed to have a preference, but I actually had a little notebook and I had written down the programs that I had looked into, and to say these are the universities that I know that offer the program. And even though I don't have a preference, any one of these universities would be perfectly fine. That is literally what I did. Now, again, that shows that you have taken initiative and you are ready, right? So once I finished my interview, I had to drive back to work. And I was very fortunate that on my way back to the office, literally went late, did the interview, drove back to the office, and in about not even 20 minutes after I finished the interview, my phone was ringing. You've been shortlisted. And I'm like, oh my God, what are you saying? I'm so excited. Yes, I interviewed very well. I was selected as one of the finalists. Now, something to note here is that the interview process in your country is just a part of the process. Even though you're selected as a finalist in your country, that does not necessarily mean that, okay, I have a scholarship, I'm gonna go. No, that's not quite how it works. Once they have selected their finalists and ranked the finalists, then those finalists get sent to IIE or whatever the body that is administering the Fulbright scholarship for your country or region in the US. And they actually go through a selection process as well. And then based on the number of scholarships that they have to offer, then you are either approved or they might send back to the embassy to say, okay, well, this person. But to be honest, more often than not, once you're selected as a finalist from your country, then it is very likely that recommendation from the embassy in your country will actually be approved or accepted by the embassy. No, something to note, guys, is that The process for Fulbright is actually a long process, meaning I say you apply, you submit your application in May. You do your, or sorry, this time it's July. You will have to do interviews. After the interviews, they might not be able to select the finalists right away, so it might take a few days or a couple of weeks before they get back to you and say, "Hey, you've been selected," right? Then you have to go through some additional processes. So you have to complete a second application. You have to provide whatever documents they ask for, and they put together a packet. So there's a process that you work with your embassy or consulate or Fulbright commission in your country to complete, and then that is sent off to the US. During that time, sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not hearing anything. Did they change their minds? No, they didn't change their minds. They're just going through the process. And so there are sometimes months when you are just twiddling your thumbs. You're like, oh my gosh, this amazing thing is happening to me. I want to share it, but I can't. And the truth is, you really can't, because you haven't really gotten the scholarship yet. You have to hear back from the US. Well, the embassy has to hear back from the US. And not just that, but then they have to go through placement. So they are the ones who actually do the whole applying to schools part of it as well. So you are not doing that. So a lot of the time you are waiting. You have a few periods of time where you are submitting documents and stuff like that. But after that, it's just silence. The embassy is not going to call you, or consulate is not going to call you every 5 minutes and say, "Hey, I'm just checking on you. Are you okay?" No, they are going to continue to do what they do. They're going to be administering the scholarship. And a lot of persons sometimes get anxious and then begin to call and pester, those persons. No, I'm sure a call once every few months to say how things are going or to ask how things are going is fine. But if you are constantly calling because you think they've changed their mind or you haven't heard anything in the past 2 weeks, then you're probably going to be annoying some people because the process is slow. Bear in mind that when you apply for Fulbright, you apply this year to go off next year. So you apply this summer, you will not leave until the next summer. Okay? So you are applying for school next fall. So bear that in mind, that it's a year-long process. It is a slow process, but completely worth it. So, with that said, I'm going to just stop here. What I would like to say to you, however, is if you want to hear some more cool content about the Fulbright process, the Fulbright experience, please like this video, clearly, subscribe, and look out for the next video. All right?